Happy Noodle Day. Let's start with two problems. We're continuing with right triangles and solving the parts of right triangles, but instead of one right triangle, we're going to mix it up, and it's going to be an intertwining of two triangles, which is going to be like spaghetti. So we're going to have these two intertwined triangles like spaghetti, and we're going to try to solve for parts of them. On this particular, oh, it looks like a bow tie, like pasta. So we're going to try solving for this, and the first thing that we're going to want to do is draw it and put all the givens in the drawing. Because I don't want to look at two places, I want to look at one place only. So if I take all of this givens, all these givens, put them in the diagram, I no longer have to look at two places. Therefore, AC is equal to 19. H is 32. And angle C is 49 degrees. Find angle ABD. To do this, I'm going to leave that as theta. And the question is to solve for theta. Each of these problems is a little bit different, and you have to try to figure out what's the easiest way to solve for your angle. And so the easiest way to solve for your angle in this one is you have to kind of work backwards. I want theta. How do I get theta? Well, I have this side, but I have no other sides to that triangle, that black triangle. It's like two dimensions here, 3 dimensions. This one falls, the red one falls inside of the board, the black one sticks out at you. So that's what you have to observe first, and that's why this is a right angle and that's a right angle. To find this angle, I need another side. The side I want to find is the common side between the two triangles. The common side between the two triangles is this one right here, that's shared. It's kind of like a missing puzzle when you're doing these problems, and if you can find the shared side, then it's often the missing link. So anyway, how do I find the blue line? What I want to do is look at the red triangle and use the information there. I have an angle, 49, I have hypotenuse, I'm looking for the opposite side. So therefore, I'm going to use my SOHCAHTOA at this point. Sine of 49 is equal to x over 19. As I solve for x, I'm going to get 19 sine 49. And I'm going to stop right there because it's a nice exact number. And I'm going to use this for my x in my next equation. I could get a calculator, but then I'm probably going to round that number, and I don't want to round out round numbers. So I'm going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to look at the black triangle. And the black triangle is going to be where I want to solve for theta. I know my 32. I also know my x here, and therefore I can use tangent, opposite over adjacent. Tangent of theta equals 32 over 19 sine 49. I put this in parentheses on the bottom to remind me when I use my calculator, I have to put that whole denominator in parentheses so the calculator follows the order of operations. If I did not put them in parentheses, it would take 39 divided by 19 and then multiply that number by sine 49 on your calculator. You can't read your mind. So what you really have to do is put it in parentheses so the calculator knows. Sine inverse undoing the tangent So then when you take the tangent inverse of 32 divided by 19 sine 49, you end up with your theta. And your theta should be 65.86. Keeping it exact until the very last step, and then rounding to the next hundred. Let's go to the next problem, and we're looking at a different type of a triangle that has two right triangles in it. And in this particular problem, the question is to solve for x. Now, let me warn you in the homework that you don't always solve the same way for all of these questions. A lot of times what you're going to do is look at the question and figure out what is the easiest way to solve for the question, because it's not always going to be the same setup. Take time up front before you dive into the problem. Right? Watch kettle never boils, right? So, the spaghetti.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome.
So anyway, we have this. So the question here is, how do we set this up to solve for my x? Take your time, do the prep work, don't dive into it, or your sauce is never going to be done correctly. Now, we have two equations with the right triangles. The two equations are going to be these two equations. Focus on your right triangles. You have the shorter one, the smaller one, and then you have the bigger one. So they're overlapping. The reason why I have to do the two equations with the two unknowns is because I can't get my answer in one equation. I have too many variables in this diagram. Well, once you write the two equations down with two unknowns, you should be able to solve for these equations. There's a certain way of solving for two equations, two unknowns. One is by a linear combination method and subtracting the two or adding the two equations, getting one variable to drop out. Another way is by substitution. There's also a matrix method. But let's take a look at solving these by substitution, because I can isolate one of the variables very easily. On the second equation, I can solve for h very easily by multiplying by x on both sides. In fact, what I could do is solve for h on both of these and then substitute in for just my x's. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to solve for h on both sides. Often it makes more sense if you look at that as a proportion, if you're having a hard time seeing that. I caution you to be careful with the parentheses on the first equation. The parentheses mean you have to distribute that tangent 38 through. Many mistakes will be made right there. Once you have them both equal to h, you can set them equal to each other. Because I'll take this one and I'll plug it right in for that h since it's equal to h. And then you're going to have an equation like that. Get the equations down. Don't do much in your head. Get an approach and then start working with the equation. An approach is really important in these problems. Now, once you have this, it's not automatic. You have to try to figure out, how can I get x by itself? I notice that it's in two terms, and if you have an x in two terms in an equation, there's got to be a way you can get that x all by itself. The way to do it is one step at a time. Get your x's together, and then factor the x out. So I'm going to get the x's together, and I'm going to factor that x out. And now that x is all by itself, it's not in two terms, all by itself. And now I can divide both sides of the equation by tangent 54 minus tangent 38. This is another place on your calculator. You have to be smarter than the calculator. You have to tell it what to do. And therefore, you have to put the parentheses in the denominator again. In fact, to be on the safe side, you could also do it in the numerator, because what the calculator is going to do is tangent times tangent 38 divided by the whole denominator, the way you have that written. And since it's following the order of operations, it's just going to do 32 times tangent 38 divided by the denominator. Okay. Slightly different than if you put parentheses around here, because if you put parentheses around the top, it's going to have the top number divided by the bottom number. It's a slight difference, but the main point is be careful on your parentheses when you plug it into your calculator. There will be a lot of mistakes. And if you plug that in correctly, you should get 42.01 feet. Notice you have two equations, two unknowns. It's a long problem. In fact, this is probably one of the longer math problems you've seen so far. That's why it's important to work down, to have your equal signs matching up. You want to make sure you have a method here on these longer problems. You don't want to be all over the place. This is not the way to solve all the problems in this section. Again, let me remind you, spend time up front on these problems. Look for the easiest approach, sometimes working backwards, looking for your x, going backwards and trying to find out what you need is the best method. Tomorrow we're going to continue with more word problems, and it's going to get a little bit more confusing. So take time in setting up your pictures.